Did he do it, right?
Yeah, He did it.
You've been heavy on social media talking about it.
He did it. And I'm the only one who's been vocal about this long before it actually.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent.
More fallout for Sean Diddy Combs, and this time a major law firm has dropped him as a client. But why now? Well, we're going to talk with renowned celebrity attorney Bradford Cohen to get
50 Cent recently teased an upcoming documentary that puts significant focus on Diddy's legal team. This comes as no surprise, but it does raise questions. Do the attorneys defending someone with a long list of charges and witnesses lined up have more at stake than just their paycheck?
Why is that not a fair outcome?
What he did here is on a magnitude of unlike anybody else you could imagine. A week after those public searches were televised, he gave us his passport. His children gave us his passport. He then paid off the mortgage entirely on his Miami home. $18 million. It's instructed that he's going to have a bail package ready so that if he was arrested, he would have something ready so that he could get out the next day and show the judge he's taking this very seriously, which he is, which is why 12 days ago, Chris, when we thought there's an indictment that may be coming, he flew to New York the very next day. And that's an extraordinary move for a defendant who's been under investigation that he's been aware of for at least 6 months. He has done everything somebody under investigation can do. I can't think of anything else that he could have done. He's fighting. He's innocent.
Matsuris Markwanov, as an example, he has been standing by Diddy for a very long time. His refusal to accept a plea deal speaks volumes. Listening to his thoughts on persevering through Diddy's year-long case feels like watching someone fully embrace the role of the devil's advocate.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent, and what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted.
However,
by
the prosecution isn't holding back. They have presented evidence claiming that Diddy allegedly used other prisoners' phone codes to send coded communications. Talk about breaking the law. This audacious move not only violated prison regulations, but also shattered any trust in his ability to follow the law, even while behind bars.
But also, Shauna, I'm curious as to your thoughts here on these allegations, right, of witness tampering. We've heard these allegations that he was, using other inmates' phone accounts to try to make phone calls in a way to make it so that they wouldn't be monitored. And there's also this concern that he might be trying to influence the jury pool via social media even while he's behind bars.
Absolutely, and I'm sure the judge really looked into that because although we know that these are allegations, there's been no evidentiary hearing as to whether or not these actually rise to the level of obstruction. Just the idea that he is not even following the rules that are enlisted by the prison is already a sign to the judge that he may not follow any conditions that are set forth. And so those type of allegations, whether or not there's been an evidentiary hearing, just speaks to the actions of the individual while incarcerated. And if you're not having good behavior at that time, the judge is going to look to say that, even if you're let out and left to your own devices, it's not going to get any better. So that has not played in his favor at all.
And Mike, if you can sort of read us in here on what this also says about the larger team around Sean Diddy Combs, noting here that the judge writes the sufficiency of any condition that would place trust in Combs and individuals in his employment, like a private security detail, to follow these conditions. I mean, they're really questioning everyone around him as well.
They are. And Kana, just listening to you and trying to talk, I really began to think about not only his associates and who's on his payroll, but also Kana, his family. Sean Combs has a very strong immediate family with his children who also do hold a level of social currency and culture, and who also too are really influential on social media. I'm thinking about Kana recently. We saw that was posted on Instagram where the children were gathered around the table and was able to communicate with Sean Combs behind bars to wish him a happy birthday. And you can hear Sean Combs on the speakerphone. They're talking about the love they have for the father. The father is talking about the love that they have for them. So really signaling to any potential witnesses that his children are a tight unit, has great social media currency. Also, too, his sons are actually involved in the music industry, to which before he was arrested, his son made a rap song really questioning the federal government, really questioning potential witnesses to go forward against his father. So when you tie all those things together, you look at the social media dynamic, the social currency, the ability to use music to possibly influence and cause distress to amongst witnesses, that is all part of the safety to which the judge is talking.
It turns out Diddy's communications weren't just outdated methods. According to reports, they involved a third-party app, raising suspicions that an insider might have been helping him maintain a secret back channel to the outside world. From there, Judge Subramanian says,
there is evidence that Combs violated Bureau of Prisons regulations during his pretrial detention to obscure his communications with third parties. We talked about this a lot. Now, Sean Combs was using other inmates' PAC numbers to make calls, was using a private messaging service to reach out to people, was also engaging in three-way phone calls. The allegation was he was not only breaking the rules, but he was also doing it to reach out to potential witnesses in the case, maybe to try to influence potential jurors through a social media campaign. Now, this is interesting because Judge Subramanian writes, the court makes no determination that the content of Combs' communications through these channels was improper. That's interesting. And this is something that he talked about in the hearing about, is it really bad he's posting things or having people post things for him on social media? So he's saying, we're not really going to focus on the content of the communications, but, and this is something that we talked about in our prior sidebar, it was just the flouting of the rules that was the problem. He writes, however, his willingness to skirt BOP rules in a way that would make it more difficult for his communications to be monitored is strong evidence that the court cannot be reasonably assured as to the sufficiency of any conditions of release, especially given that they occurred when Combs was seeking bail and when he knew the government's concerns about witness tampering and obstruction were front and center. Yeah. Really bad that he's doing this when he's already accused of obstruction and he's under the government's eye. But, and this is also interesting, you know another reason why the court was skeptical about Sean Combs being released? And, Judge Subramanian at least kind of entertained what would bail look like, what would pretrial release look like. He went on a back and forth, and we'll talk about this in a minute, where Sean Combs' attorneys had said he has an apartment in New York, there will be private security. Well, here's what the court says. The court doubts the sufficiency of any conditions that place trust in Combs and individuals in his employ, like a private security detail, to follow those conditions. So, wow. So it really seems swayed by the prosecution's argument that his private security team could probably be susceptible to manipulation.
Speaking of leaks, remember the phone call between Diddy and his children that went viral? While some speculated it was artificial intelligence, AI, it might have been real. The details from the leak easily align with recent revelations. Additionally, some conspiracy theorists suggest that the mention of pizza boxes in the call could be a code for something far more sinister. It was a pizza box.
Well, what about, they say, quote, the defendant also uses a non-authorized third-party messaging service called Contact Me ASAP to obscure his communications. The defendant appears to be using two Contact Me ASAP accounts. First, the defendant's BOP contact list includes a particular email address assigned to the defendant's son, which does not appear to be an account owned by the defendant's son, but instead appears to be an email address connected to Contact Me ASAP. Second, the defendant appears to be using another inmate's Contact Me ASAP account, primarily using email 1. The defendant has exchanged hundreds of text messages via Contact Me ASAP with dozens of individuals, including attorneys and individuals who are not on the defendant's contact list. So any issue there?
again, if he's contacting his attorneys, it's usually, it always is attorney-client privilege, unless there's a third party involved. Some people don't feel comfortable talking to their attorneys on jail calls, even though they know they're not supposed to be listening to those calls. I can tell you, they do listen to some of those phone calls. They're not supposed to. They don't. They might not use it in a court of law. But a lot of times you find that they oh, sorry, by accident, I didn't realize it was his attorney until I was 3 minutes in.
Right.
So I don't take much of that unless, like I said, unless they have some damning evidence that he is doing something crazy on those phone calls, or he's doing something crazy on that application. Other than that, just using it.
I guess the counter argument would be, putting aside what the content is, we'll get to that. If he's breaking the rules of the prison, right? This is not the prison. If he's breaking the rules of the detention center, should he be on the outside? Is he going to flop the rules of his bail? That would be the argument.
Yeah, I mean that's a better argument, but the problem is that, you know, quote unquote breaking the rules by making phone calls and things of that nature, unless those phone calls are the prohibited thing. Like if I am calling a witness directly and having direct witness contact by using this kind of obscure messaging and things of that nature, 100%. But I think just because he uses third-party calls, that's like, you know, like I said, 99% of the cases do that.
Okay, so let me, there's just so much to get through, so I want to get through everything with you. So this is, the prosecutors have indicated that they will produce these calls to Combs and his lawyers through a filter team prior to what is a scheduled bail hearing on November 22nd, 2024. We're going to be covering that on Long Prime. But then they write this: on multiple calls, often using the PAC numbers of other inmates, the defendant is explicit about his intention to use public statements to alter public perception. And the defendant leaves no doubt that the narrative he wants to leave is the potential jury pool's perception of this criminal proceeding. And examples of these efforts, they say, are plentiful. And then they black out and they redact all of those examples. First, Bradford, why the redactions?
Well, the redactions probably because they don't want it to then make it public what his position is. Like, I didn't do it. This one witness, she did X, Y, Z. I'm sure that there's things in there that the government doesn't want the public to hear because the government has their narrow view of what's going on, right? And whenever the defendant then wants to address that narrow view and put out his own statement or address it in a different way, they want to curtail that because they have a certain way to look at a case. They don't want anyone looking at it differently. I find this to be the most ironic thing. It's like, it's hypocrisy at its best, because although the New York Southern District office does not themselves leak things often, they have in the past, but in this case, I don't think there's any evidence that they leaked